conducting my research on authenticity and changes in private residences in the Edinburgh World Heritage Site. Before it starts, I just want to say I kind of analysed Edinburgh Planning Authority and Historic Scotland and stuff in this, but none of it's meant to be critical. It's more meant to show the difficulties encountered in trying to maintain kind of cohesion in the process. So the reason that I wanted to do this research is because there's estimated to be 24,000 people living in the Edinburgh World Heritage Site, so it's quite a live heritage site, and I thought it would be interesting to see how they maintain authenticity in private residences and how it's a balancing act between homeowners and the planning authority. So I started out by identifying the number of interventions into private residences from 2011 to 12, then doing statistical analysis. So here's the 2011 and 2012 planning results of private residences, and 2012 only actually goes through November because that's when this was originally done. You can see the vast majority are approved, a very small number are denied every year, and then there's some that are withdrawn with mixed results and no permission necessary at all. So from this I did some statistical things and some graphs. Obviously the biggest number of interventions are internal alterations. Following that, environmentally friendly windows, usually double glazed. And then after that, extensions, subdivisions, and new timber section case aren't happening very often, I'm afraid. Other is just a mix of things that weren't enough to put themselves on the graph. The next one that I did was seeing the reasons for denial. So the biggest reason for denial is stated as being not in character, diminishing from the character, or a loss of character. And then following that, contrary to non-statutory guidelines in respect to alteration of listed buildings, seems to be the biggest reasons for denials. There's this many because you can give several reasons for the case. There's not actually too many denials happening. So then I wanted to look at some specific examples, and I chose 66 Northumberland Street to look at inconsistencies in materials and detailing. They wanted to put in new timber, sash and case double glazed windows on the principal elevation of the property. This was approved by Edinburgh Planning Authority with concern from Historic Scotland and an objection from the Architectural Heritage Society of Scotland. You can see the purple, it's not very clear on here actually, but the purple is the new window that they're wanting to put in. So from this I wanted to contrast it with another case. So I needed to find another case that had similar intervention with materials and detailing as well. So I tried to find another one that was actually another window, which happened to be its neighbour at 68 Northumberland Street on the same side of the street right next door. They hired the same architect to put in the same kind of window, a new timber sash and case double glazed window. This one was first denied by the planning authority on the grounds that it had an adverse impact on the building and it was contrary to guidelines. Then they appealed and it was granted after the appeal. There was no concern from Historic Scotland at any point in this case, although the Architectural Heritage Society of Scotland did object. So it raises the question, once it was appealed and granted, did they no longer think it detracted from the building? Did they not think what they originally said, that it was contrary to the guidelines? Because guidelines do suggest that these new double glazed windows are not necessarily appropriate on the front facade of the building. So I think that's one of the examples of an inconsistency in materials and detailing, although obviously there are lots of other ways we could analyze the use of materials and detailing in terms of authenticity. So from this, I wanted to look at another kind, and I looked at inconsistency in the character and built form. So I found this case at 3 Abercrombie Place, where they wanted to put a kitchen into the front room and change the back room from a study to a bathroom. It did mean putting in some new walls. So this was approved by the Planning Authority with concern from Historic Scotland and an objection from the Architectural Heritage Society of Scotland. It also goes against the guidance that says that there are no kitchens, or kitchens should not be put in the principal rooms of flats, especially when they're onto the street side, as this one is. So obviously this was picked up by Historic Scotland and the Architectural Heritage Society of Scotland, but not by the Planning Authority. So this other case at 5 Douglas Crescent involves extending or taking down some of the wall there to put in those double doors going to the kitchen, as well as putting a bathroom in the hallway and some additional door access. This was denied by Edinburgh Planning Authority with no concern from Historic Scotland and an objection from the Architectural Heritage Society of Scotland. So if you put these two cases together, it would suggest that they value retaining original walls over putting kitchens in principal rooms on the front elevation, which is not what any of the guidance says. So from the reasons that they've given for the denial, these two seem to really clash a bit. Obviously we have pretty consistent objections from the Architectural Heritage Society of Scotland in the cases that I've shown you. But again, that's just based, I think, on the fact that they are quite serious about all of the things I've mentioned. They don't really like any of these things. So having looked at these kinds of inconsistencies, it seems quite clear that it's very difficult to make all of this coherent. The majority of justifications used by the planning authority are non-compliant with non-statutory guidelines, which is difficult because they're non-binding. So Edinburgh Planning can just pick and choose the reasons that they would like to use for denial. And it really means that, in my mind, the planning authority becomes a big interpreter of authenticity in the World Heritage Site and private residences. They can decide which interventions to track from individual buildings, or a wider area, or the site as a whole. And they also seem to decide the scope and extent of authenticity in these private residences. The decisions that I've shown you are not always consistent, but it's also not necessarily a clear portrayal of what authenticity means in this site. They've shown that it is very complicated to be coherent about this, and I don't think that's necessarily a criticism of any of the bodies involved. It just shows how difficult it is to apply these guidelines uniformly. And finally, in terms of the study, there obviously is a lot more research to be done on this about why this is happening, what factors are contributing, but one of the things I think would be quite interesting to do is, that was not very easy for me to do particularly, is to speak to the planning authority, speak to the people involved, show them these cases and say, what was it about this case that made you rule this way, and not to go another way with it. But just to start anyway.
Thank you.